Democrats. Today is Tuesday, July 12th, and it's time for the Chair's Daily Live. Ooh, I've been running around, looks like I'm outside. So if you live in Tulsa, and it looks like if you live anywhere in Oklahoma, you've heard about the explosive Tulsa Public Schools board meeting last night. So I don't have kids in Tulsa Public Schools. I missed the meeting, but reading my social media, it looks like it was quite a doozy. So I reached out to two members of the Tulsa School Board to get their take on it. So because social media doesn't give us both sides. Social media is a place where people get to spout their opinions without a fact check and without having to answer to folks. And so what I thought I would do is I would invite some folks on and see if we can get down to the bottom of it. Now, if you logged in hoping that you were going to see some fireworks and some explosion and some, gotcha stuff, that's not what I'm doing today. That's all on Facebook, and you can see that and you can get that. What I'm trying to do is get folks to give us the background, give us the real kind of what happened, so that all the speculation that's going on Facebook, and I guess it's on Twitter, but I disabled my Twitter, so it's all over the place. I want us to have the facts because that's what matters. And I'm just going to remind everybody of my belief. You guys know I believe that the closer that your elected official lives to your house, the more of your life they affect. And people don't vote in school board elections, and people don't think that they're important. And people like me, I don't have kids, I don't go to the meetings, but those are the people that we're going to look to take care of us later. And elections turn on what happens in our education system. And so if we're not paying attention to the school boards, they're going to sneak up on us, and a lot of things are going to be happening. So today I'm going to be joined by Stacy Woolley, who is the president of the Tulsa Public School Board, and Janetti Marshall. We're going to do them one at a time because one more time, no explosions, no drama. That's not what this is about. We're going to do them one at a time and have them give us the how we got here and what's next. So join me in welcoming Stacy Woolley. Hi, Stacy.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for joining me. So for background, because some of the people who are commenting don't live in Tulsa, so I want to ask you, how long have you been on the school board?
I am still a relatively new school board. I have been here for 3 years. As you know, some folks stay on the school board about some of our folks stay in DC. So we've had folks on the board 24 years. So I am just a baby when it comes to school board world.
There's somebody who's been on the school board for 24 years?
Not currently serving, but yes. Oh. While I was on the board, we had someone that long.
Oh, okay. I think a lot of things can change in 24 years. Okay. So how did you come to be the board president?
The board votes each year when there's an election. After we seat new board members, it is required by law to vote to elect new leadership. Now, that doesn't mean leadership has to change, but often it does. And there's just a new election of the board leadership by the board each April, generally.
Okay. All righty. So I just wanted to give people a little bit of background. So what I understood, let me tell you what I understood from social media. There was a meeting. There were some agenda items that people didn't agree with. There's been a call for an audit, and some folks got mad and left the room. Is that what happened?
Well, that's an abbreviated version of what happened. Yes. So there were some things that did not pass. The audit was pursued about a week ago by the governor at the request of two board members. And so, yes, that's part of the equation, but it's certainly not the whole story.
So from what I understand, and here's where I'm going to ask you a very specific question so that people can understand. The agenda had the things that people were going to vote on. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
How far in advance do board members, I'm talking with my hands, how far in advance do board members receive the agenda?
Per policy and in practice, board members receive the agenda 10 days in advance. Now, that is a draft agenda, and it can change between the initial distribution and the final. That being said, we work really hard not to make changes, and if there are changes, the board is notified by a call directly from the superintendent. And if there is a change, that change occurs the Friday before the meeting on Monday.
Okay, so were there any surprise items on last night's agenda?
There were no surprise items on the agenda. I would say there are never surprise items on the agenda. And the only opportunity for anything to happen that I would call a surprise is if there was something that came up under new business. And honestly, since I have been on the board, there has not been a time that if anything were to be on the agenda, the superintendent would not have spoken with me to let me know it would be there prior to the meeting.
Okay. And you understand, I'm just kind of building, like
Sure.
trying to get to where we are, because there's, like I said, all of the chatter on Facebook, and I just want to get to so that everybody understands. So the items that were voted down last night, or the items that caused the controversy, were they on the agenda?
Yes, they were.
Do the board members have any input to what goes on the agenda, or does the superintendent just decide and it just appears on the agenda?
So after the elections of leadership in April, it becomes per policy, the job of the president to work with the superintendent to create the agenda. Now, that being said, board members can request that items be added prior to the agenda, being created, of course. And there are also opportunities for board members to make requests for changes to the agenda in advance of the meeting.
So they get the agenda 10 days in advance. They can look it over, make some notes, what they plan to say, blah, blah, blah. But do they have time in the in-between, between receiving it and the meeting, to negotiate, or is the agenda solid and they can add it to the next meeting?
So we have a specific policy that we developed together that has evolved since the time that I have been in the leadership position as president. And the way that policy works is that we extended the amount of time that folks have the agenda in front of them by a week. And as part of that, the request and the agreement made during these working sessions that came to bring these policy changes about with all of the board members, we determined that every board member would have the draft agenda 10 days in advance. They would then have over the weekend until close of business, I believe, or 6 p.m. on Monday, to submit any questions they have with regard to the agenda. The administration then has a specific amount of time that they can reply to those questions. And any questions and answers that take place in that time will be published as part of the agenda to make sure that questions are not just the information that comes to the board members, but is available to the public for the purpose of transparency. So they have time to ask questions, receive answers, and after that, if they decide that this item is of significant importance, they also have the opportunity to remove it from consent and put it on for information at the request of the board member.
Okay. I'm just, because it felt like reading the covers that folks were surprised by what happened on the agenda, and that's going on. So I think I understand the agenda. And so there were things voted down. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that one. There's another thing that was on Facebook, because I want to just kind of squash a lot of the things that are on Facebook so that the school board members, can focus on doing what we need to do to kind of move things on. Mm-hmm. There's some talk about all of the racism on the board. Mm-hmm. To find your picture to post, to tell people that you were going to be here, and to find Dr. Marshall's picture to post to let people know that she was going to join. I looked at the pictures of the folks that were there. I see you as a Native American woman. There are 2 African American women. There's a Latina on the board. It feels to me, but I'm not in the middle of it, like it's a diverse school board. Is that?
Yeah, I think in comparison to many districts, specifically in Oklahoma, that we are a relatively diverse board. Now, that being said, our Latinx community within Tulsa Public School System is approximately 40% at this time. And so that is an area that we need to make sure that we have really strong representation for. But outside of that, I would say, we're relatively reflective of our community. So do we always want to increase the amount of diversity we have, not only of the color of our skin or our cultures, but also diversity of thought? Absolutely. But I do feel like it's as close as, I mean, I appreciate where we are.
So, and I'm trying not to box you into a corner. So what happens now?
So what happens now? Well, what I am hopeful for is that with a day or two to reflect, remove ourselves from the heat of the moment and the sounds, the external sound that comes when one is in a boardroom, and remove each other from one another and actually let ourselves be grounded in what our purpose is, and recognizing the outcomes of what happened because of the tie vote on many of these items. I hope what happens is that everyone, myself included, will, extend an olive branch to one another on behalf of our students. So we have to stop divisiveness. We have to, every one of us, listen to hear and understand, and be willing to compromise in whatever way is necessary to best serve our students. That's what I hope happens.
So I don't know about a consent agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that that's sort of at the bottom of a lot of this. Can you just share with, because that circulated all over the place, could you share with people what a consent agenda is?
Yes, generally speaking, and I should say one more thing about your question about what happens next. What literally happens next is we have another board meeting that was already planned for Thursday, and that was to do different work, but we certainly know that this work is of critical importance to make sure that we can have the district running and have it ready and continue to work through the summer to deliver food to students and all those things. So that meeting on Thursday, first up to bat, will be trying to resolve these issues. Also, I have asked that the administration submit to the county clerk that we will have a meeting each day until this matter is resolved and we actually have an outcome. Because at this point, with a tie, the item is neither approved nor voted down. It's technically just in limbo, but it means that the district doesn't have the authority to pay their bills. And it's kind of a technicality that it works this way, because we approved many things already. We have the money for those things, but we actually have to approve the spending of the money in the current fiscal year. So I just want to make sure that's clear. Because
you answered my next question, because my next question was, what happens now? Are we just in limbo? Are there meetings? Are there side meetings side conversations to try and get to some resolution? Because my board member, I am disgusted by his behavior, because he's made numerous, posts and gone to the press and done all of these things, which I feel like aren't in the spirit of resolution. And I say that about mine because he's supposedly representing me. So where do we go? Are we engaging the members who walked out? Are we engaging them so we can get somewhere? And when I say engaging, I don't mean just calling. Are we interacting with? Are we listening? Are we explaining whatever needs to happen?
Sure. I will tell you that myself. So with the rules of a quorum, we have to be really careful about engaging outside of board meetings. Mm-hmm. We cannot create what is known as a rolling quorum, which is kind of complicated for folks who don't necessarily follow how those things work. So any given subject can really only be discussed by 3 people. Okay, so if I, as the board president, decided I needed to speak with Vice President Croissant, then that would mean we could call one other person and have a conversation about this matter. Now, I haven't spoken with anyone yet. It's my personal belief that I think we could all take some time to be with ourselves and think about what happened and what it means and what we are called upon to do next. But I do plan on reaching out to a board member or 2 tomorrow. I haven't spoken with Mr. Croissant just to make sure I can do that. And I want to be able to have those conversations. So yes, I plan on doing that tomorrow, but I was trying to take today as an opportunity for people to reflect on their own.
A moment for cooler heads.
Yeah, including my own.
Right. Awesome. Well, let me say this. You and I don't talk that often. But when I called you and you said, yes, I'm grateful for that. And so I wanted to say thank you because I'm doing this in your cooling off period.
Well, sometimes just talking through things with people who we represent, who genuinely just have a concern for our students. And, like you said, you don't have kids in the district. You don't have a direct tie other than knowing that the education of all of our population directly affects us all. Having conversations with people who are truly quite on the outside can be incredibly helpful because it can help to bring us some focus and to really think about, is what I'm saying and feeling something that is genuine? Is it fair? Is it appropriate? And I think it actually can be almost like counseling. So I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk through it.
Okay, there's one question that is popping up on my side. I don't know if you can see it, so I do have to ask, and I'm going to ask Dr. Marshall about it as well.
Okay.
Separate from yesterday's meeting,
Mm-hmm.
There's all of this. Okay, you are a nonpartisan person. I need to be clear for anybody who's watching that school board is a nonpartisan race, but I'm a partisan chick. I am angered by the governor dropping a little nugget that there may have been some CRT taught at some training that Tulsa Public School folks went to. Can you talk very briefly about that? Do you, I know that the public's not supposed to know, which is annoying, but have you seen the alleged CRT? Are you aware of it specifically?
So actually, no, the district has not yet received the specific report from the Oklahoma State Department of Education for us to actually know what the exact accusation was. It is my understanding that the complaint was brought forward by a teacher who participated in a professional development that was provided by an outside organization out of Florida. This training was provided as an opportunity that fulfills a requirement of a specific training that's mandated by the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And it's also my understanding that the part of the professional development that she was concerned about was actually part of the continued reading for further understanding or supplemental materials. Now, again, we haven't seen the official report. So that's what I understand, and that could evolve, but that's my understanding for now.
Okay, so that's why I'm mad about it, because it's a teaser that no one can be the true judge of.
Yes, and it's also, in fairness, the bill is House Bill 1775. It does not say CRT.
Right.
And without being partisan, schools do not teach CRT. It is a much too complex theory for any student that I know, and I've worked with kids my whole adult life, to understand. It is a theory that is taught in law school, and regardless of accusations by outside sources, our kindergartners are not being taught to hate themselves because they're white.
Okay, I just really wanted you to say that out loud. I knew the answer, but I wanted you to say that out loud. Again, I want to say thank you for joining. I hope that I didn't back you into a corner, and you'll take my call the next time I call. But I am now going to ask Janetti Marshall to join us. But thank you, and you have a nice evening.
Thank you, and you too.
Thanks. So I'm welcoming Dr. Janetti Marshall, who also serves on the school board, to give us kind of a full picture. So we've heard part of the story. I like to present, a more robust, so that we're covering the whole story again, not the junk that's on social media. And so first of all, thank you, Dr. Marshall, for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here with you.
Thank you. So I asked President Woolley how long she's been on the school board. So I'm going to ask you as well. How long have you been on the school board?
5 years.
5 years. And you represent what district?
District 3, which is the largest district out of the 7, and it covers almost all of North Tulsa.
Okay, I have stuff to say, but I'm going to leave that alone. That feels like, yeah, I have stuff to say, but I'm going to leave that alone. So I'm going to ask you some of the foundational questions that I asked President Woolley again, just for the basis. So she indicated that the board, all the board members get the agenda 10 days in advance. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay, and did the agenda from last night's meeting change very much?
No, it did not.
Okay. I just want to make sure. And so I promised my audience that we wouldn't get into picking sides or one side saying negative things about the other, because I think it's important that we just talk facts. But was there an opportunity for you to review the agenda and voice the parts about the agenda that you weren't comfortable with?
Well, in order to answer that, I have to take you back to some history.
Okay.
Yes, first of all, yes, I did have an opportunity to review. However, historically, what has happened, if I reviewed something and I put the question out early, what I observed and part of with board meetings was that there's a staging that took place, because I asked very hard, pointed questions, digging for the meat of the information that I need to make sound decisions. So I have in past watched staging. I'm an old investigator. I know what staging is when I see it. So my position, based on our ethical practices, our ethics practices of a board, it states that we will have open conversation, and we will not vote until we have open conversation, number one. Number two, even in asking questions early, I have gone without getting the information that I need. As evidenced by this Snickerdoodle, I voted it down 3 times because I could not get information from the district that told me basically a portfolio, so I can find out about the company, what the outcomes have been with other districts, because when you start voting to give someone 500,000, 150,000, 1.2 million, I believe as board members, we need to know what the track record is. So yes, I reviewed it, and no, I did not ask questions until I got to the board, because the other caveat that I have put out for the 5 years is that because I want background information, I have a standing request. When you bring items that we're going into a contract with consultants or individuals or companies, corporations, I want a portfolio of that company. We've had that discussion in open board meeting. I shouldn't have to ask for it every time. It is an opening caveat to decision-making process, and it should be a part of what we get. This thing with Snickerdoodle, that was one of the questions that I asked, And now here we are. Snickerdoodle doesn't even have a website, and we're in trouble.
What is Snickerdoodle for those of us who aren't intimately?
Snickerbox.
I'm sorry.
I keep saying Snickerdoodle because we all messed it up. It's Snickerbox, actually.
Okay.
And it's a platform that involves something that Devin Fletcher was working with talent.
Okay.
So yeah.
So let me ask a question about Devin Fletcher. Don't know him, not related to him, and just peripherally aware that he's no longer with Tulsa Public Schools, right?
Absolutely.
And there are questions about money spent by Mr. Fletcher.
Absolutely.
Okay. I understand from our conversation that you've been requesting an audit. Are those two things related?
Snickerbox came up after I requested, because I've been requesting the audit for 5 years. We've only been in contract with Snickerbox for 3 years. But that's just an example of why I requested an audit. And it came up at a time that it actually validated my points as to why we need background information, because the fact is, the CEO of Snickerbox is a Broad Foundation, a Broad Academy graduate with Devin Fletcher. So there are inside connections. And that's part of what I look for when I'm considering voting for money for any corporation.
Okay. And so I've been reading all day on Facebook, and I heard Dr. Gist say that there is a yearly audit. How is the audit that you're requesting a different audit? And is the audit you're requesting the same audit that the governor is asking for?
The yearly audit there's a couple of types of audits. You have an audit that basically the auditor goes in and takes samplings from different areas to see if there's checks and balances, I's dotted, T's crossed. A special audit is a forensic investigative audit. They're going in and they're pulling the cover off of everything. They're looking at everything across the board in the operation of the district. But when I look at it and you think about it, the yearly audit, why is it the yearly audit didn't turn up the $20,000? It's because it's a sampling audit, and so it's not going to uncover anything unless they know that they're looking for something in a specific area. And again, the forensic audit is going to uncover it because they're looking for everything.
So the audit that you're asking for, is it the same kind of audit that, and be careful here, is it the same kind of audit that the governor is asking for?
Yes.
Okay. So the reason why I said be careful, I know that you sit in a nonpartisan position. I want to own that for everybody who's watching. Yes. But again, as I said with President Woolley, I'm a partisan chick. The governor in his tenure has asked for a bunch of audits of a bunch of things. The audits happen, and then they try to keep us from finding the information. So why do we think this audit would be any different?
Given the recent audits that the state auditor has conducted, I believe they've been very forthcoming with all the information. I don't know of any shortcomings, and there may be. I just don't know of it.
They audited Swadley's. He tried to keep us from finding out about it. They audited Class Wallet. They tried to keep us from finding out about it. I mean, literally, there are memos showing where they said, don't release this information. They audited the money that they wasted on paying for COVID things that we didn't get. And they kept that information, literally the state auditor had to go to the press to get that information out because the governor was in the way of it. Again, I'm the partisan person, and I'm not asking you to be partisan, but it feels to me that the governor is being opportunistic with calling for an audit, but what confidence do we have that we'll find out what happens? I mean, we already know what happened with Mr. Fletcher. How how do we know that this audit will turn up anything material? Because you've been asking for 5 years, so you believe that there's something material there.
Absolutely. I've been watching the way that bond money is obtained. There are requests for bond money from the community. An example, we had, what was it, $2 million was requested in the 15 bond for Jones Elementary School because a site review was done by the site committee, and the results was that that school would, the district, the area, the neighborhood would outgrow the school. So there needed to be an add-on to that school. So they came to the community and put that as a part of the bond package. That was 2015. In 2020, they asked to close the school. The superintendent did. However, the site committee had already cited in their report that if we don't add on, if we don't do the work, the school is not going to contain all of the children. The children were in there enrolled and attending school at 110% when we closed it. But the $2 million was still sitting there. It took me 3 months to get a report from the district as to why we didn't use the $2 million that was granted by the community for that add-on. And what I finally got was, well, the way the building was positioned on the land and the way the land is, you can't do a build on. Well, there was an architectural design and everything else that was presented to the public to say, this is what we have. How did you know it was $2 million if you didn't have someone survey the land, measure it off, and tell you, a structural engineer and all of that? So there are things like that. So now that $2 million went someplace else. And there are many examples like that. So those are the things that I have been questioning. And then the fact that when there are requests for monies, recommendations, and you ask for information about certain corporations or individuals, you're not given that information. So there's just a lot of things that didn't add up for me. And that's why I asked for a forensic investigative audit, because I know that that's a thorough audit.
So let me ask this question, because I'm brokenhearted about Reading Partners, because I volunteered with Reading Partners for years. Because this has come to a head, right? And would you agree that it's come to a head?
Yes, I would.
Because this has come to a head, are we in a position now to have the conversations that you feel like we need to have to be able to move on? Or do you think that there's more that needs to happen?
Well, I believe we've been at the position to have the conversations a long time. However, everybody has not been on board for those conversations. And let me say this, and I said it last night, I think Reading Partners is a great organization. And my voting against the entire consent agenda had nothing to do with Reading Partners. It was the fact that there was about 5 other items on there that there was more information needed in order to make a informed decision on a vote. And we tried twice to have them move it to the agenda, the action agenda for the next meeting. So therefore, we voted again. I voted against it, and then others. So I want us to come to a point where we can discuss, but we also have to understand, I represent the community that has been historically classified as marginalized. And when I look at test scores, when I look at the fact that I have children graduating from high school reading at 3rd grade and below level, which they're prime targets for the school to prison pipeline. So I want us to come actually and talk about it. I have no problem with voting on those other items. Now, I will say the superintendent did reach out today and say that she would get any information I needed that would assist in my decision-making process about all the items that I had questions about.
Okay, so that's the question that I have. That's the question that I have. That's what I'm asking. So now, are we at a place are we at a place now where where the school board, are you at a place now where you're getting the information? Because I understand sometimes we have to make a point. So are we at a place where we can make some decisions and move forward?
I certainly hope so. I am willing, because all I ever want is transparency and the information. And unfortunately, when we changed the voting process and they started putting everything on a consent agenda, you can't. We've been told several different stories. And what I was first told in training by OSSBA was that you could not carve out and you couldn't pick. They said, don't do it. But now I'm hearing, oh, yeah, you can do it. But so until we have some definitive answers on protocol and procedure and process, the only thing that I can think of is to vote no and let them bring it back.
Okay, so President Woolley said that there's going to be a meeting every day until you guys resolve this. Do you feel like that is a productive solution?
I think the most productive solution is to just provide the information. And I think that we can iron it out in one meeting. If the information comes forth, we can iron it out in one meeting. Because I'm certainly not trying to be difficult, but I'm looking at the fact that I can't sign a blank check. And that's what I'm doing if I'm not fully understanding a recommendation. And I keep going back to Snickerdoodle. It has proven my point. All the information wasn't there. I voted no, and now we're in this situation.
Okay. I think I understand it. And as we discussed when we talked earlier today, and by the way, thank you. I wanted people to understand what happened, right?
Yes.
And not just relation and all of that kind of good stuff. And I want to ask one more question. No, I don't think I will ask that question. I want to wrap this up. So you've had conversation with the superintendent. You feel she's offered to provide you the information that you feel like you need in order to make a decision, in order to vote going forward.
Yes.
And that's a result of that's a result of what happened last night.
Yes.
Okay. But you've been asking that question all along.
Yes.
Okay. And so as a result of what happened last night, the door is open for you to get the information that you need in order to vote going forward.
Absolutely.
And then the protocol question of, can you take out pieces that you're uncomfortable with and vote on the things that you are comfortable with? You're going to take that up.
I'm going to take that up to find out who we can get. I don't know if we need an attorney general's opinion. I don't know who we actually need an opinion of, but I will pursue it further because, number one, if we are, as taxpayers, they're paying for us to go to training with the OSSBA. So if OSSBA is saying one thing and then they come back and say, well, what we say bears no weight, why are we going to that training?
Understood. Dr. Marshall, I don't talk to you that often, but when you got the call and were asked to join, you didn't ask me a whole lot of questions. You said sure. And for that, I am grateful. And I want to say thank you. What I try to do every day when I come here is I try to educate voters, try to make sure that people know the whole story. So when they show up at the ballot box, that they're a little bit more informed than they were before they watched me. I think that school board is ultra important and we don't pay enough attention because it leaks out into everything that we do. And last night's spectacle, that's the only word I can call it. Last night's spectacle has shined a big light on it and given us an opportunity to have this conversation. So thank you so very much for allowing us this opportunity to kind of get this information out there so that people could have a more full picture of what happened.
Well, and thank you for all that you do, because information and informed constituency is the best constituency I know. because you maintain control of the narrative when you are informed and you can move forward through that information.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks. So here's the thing. As I said at the beginning, it's not my intent to decide who's wrong or who's right or any of that. I want people to be informed. Here's another thing. I put in 3 phone calls today. I called President Woolley. I called a bad number for Dr. Marshall. I had an old number, called someone else who knew her, and was able to put that together. Yesterday's homework was for you to go out and find out who is representing you. What happened last night is more of a reason why you have to do it. You need to be able to ask the questions. And there was a lot of questions over here in the comments that I'm not trying to cause any fights. I just want to provide information that you guys have. These folks were elected by 3 people. I mean, no one shows up for school board elections, which is another lesson. But these people were elected. And they owe their constituencies an explanation. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to send them an email. If you can't find their phone number, you give them a call and ask your questions and hold them accountable. Hold them accountable to representing us, and not just whims and not just bully pulpits and crazy allegiances and whatever, but they have to be doing the job that they were elected for. And so I ask you to reach out to your elected official and let them know how you feel about it. Because what I heard was that there was going to be a meeting every day until they resolved it. What I heard is now Superintendent Gist is going to be more responsive to answering some specific questions. I heard Dr. Marshall saying she's going to get the information and she's going to vote. And so there are some pieces that have to happen. School goes back in session in like a month. Things need to be resolved. Let them hear your opinion. We missed the opportunity to vote. That's passed. They're in there now. Let them hear your opinion. Hold them accountable. Thank you so very much for joining me. I went over time today, but you guys are still here. Thanks so much. I'll be back here tomorrow talking to a candidate for office. Have a great one.